In that press conference with President Trump, a reporter asked you whether you believe that President Trump is in fact a fascist, a word that you've used in the past. You were about to answer, then President Trump sort of jumped in and he said, quote, "That's okay, you can just say yes. It's easier than explaining it." So, Mr. Mayor-elect, just to be very clear, do you think that President Trump is a fascist?
And after President Trump said that, I said yes. And
so you do?
And that's something that I've said in the past. I say it today. And I think what I appreciated about the conversation that I had with the president was that we were not shy about the places of disagreement, about the politics that has brought us to this moment. And we also wanted to focus on what it could look like to deliver on a shared analysis of an affordability crisis for New Yorkers.
You've also said in the past that President Trump has engaged in a, quote, attack on our democracy. You've called him a despot. Do you still believe President Trump is a threat to the democracy?
Everything that I've said in the past, I continue to believe. And that's the thing that I think is important in our politics, is that we don't shy away from where we have disagreements, but we understand what it is that brings us to that table. Because I'm not coming into the Oval Office to make a point or make a stand. I'm coming in there to deliver for New Yorkers. And a few weeks ago, I was asked by a reporter 3 words to describe myself. I said New York City. And that's what animated that conversation. How do we deliver for the people of New York City?
I think that some of your supporters would be curious to know. You say you stand by your past statements that, yes, he's a threat to the democracy. How do you square working with someone who you still think is a threat to the democracy?
I think working for the people of New York City demands that you work with everyone and anyone, and that you always look to find those areas of agreement while not overlooking the places of disagreement. And I think this was something that came up in our meeting. We spoke about immigration. We spoke about the fact that in New York City, we have sanctuary city policies that allow for the city to work with the federal government on around 170 serious crimes. The concern for so many New Yorkers comes about anything beyond that. And I spoke about the importance of us being able to protect New Yorkers, and some of the incidents that we see, they do not do that.
That was New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani not backing away from his past statements, rightfully calling Donald Trump a fascist and a despot. And in fact, if you watch the video from his meeting with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, he's right. He did say yes when he was asked if he still believed Trump was a fascist.
And I want to clarify your answer to Stephen Nelson. He asked about your comment calling the president a fascist, and your answer was, both President Trump and I have been clear about our positions and our views. Are you affirming that you think President Trump is a fascist?
I've spoken about...
That's okay. You can just say yes. Okay. It's easier. It's easier than explaining it. I don't mind.
And frankly, I know that legacy media loves to pretend that it's some big shock that Mamdani will keep his word. But the shock here is not that Mamdani would stay true to his previously stated positions. The shock is, and always has been, that there is a fascist in the White House. Like, I get that the media loves to normalize insane behavior by Donald Trump or grade him on a curve, but what are we doing here? The guy has illegally deployed the National Guard and the U.S. military into American cities. He's declared birthright citizenship, which is in the Constitution, illegal. He doesn't accept election results that he doesn't win. He has attacked the free press and literally got his FCC to pressure ABC into canceling Jimmy Kimmel, a comedian, for criticizing Dear Leader. He demands loyalty from federal officials and fires them when they don't acquiesce to his unlawful demands, pardons his allies and prosecutes his opponents, and he is literally on camera saying that he wants to be a dictator for a day. That's the part worth talking about. Not expressing surprise that Mamdani would correctly diagnose the problem and then stick to that diagnosis. In fact, I also asked Mamdani about Donald Trump's threats to democracy, especially in light of Mamdani's relentless focus on affordability, and here's what he had to say. How do you think about the issue of affordability in the broader context of other issues, specifically threats against democracy? And so a lot of Democrats were focused on threats against democracy, especially at the hands of this, of what would ultimately become the Trump administration, and rightfully so. We're seeing a lot of those threats that we were worried about play themselves out, either as bad or worse than we had anticipated. But, you know, the Democrats relied on a threats to democracy message in 2024, and we saw the extent to which the economy and affordability were actually more important. Now we're in a little bit of a different boat, because we are, as I said, seeing those threats, the potential for threats to democracy really play themselves out in a big way. But there's an uncertainty now, given what we learned in 2024 about leaning into the threats to democracy messaging. And so how do you think about both of those issues relative to the other? Are they mutually exclusive?
I think we have to understand the authoritarian administration and the affordability crisis as twin crises that New Yorkers are facing at the same time. And I think often about what Fiorello LaGuardia once said many decades ago, which is you cannot preach liberty to starving land. We cannot speak to New Yorkers struggling to afford their groceries, their childcare, their public transit, their rent about the importance of democracy solely as a value or as an ideal. We have to speak to them also about the ways in which that democracy can deliver for their material needs. Doing both of these things, I think, is critical because it shows that we care about the very essence and the fabric of our democracy across this country, and also that democracy, if it does not deliver for working people, it is still insufficient.
And of course, to watch the full interview with Zohran Mamdani and the rest of my interviews, as well as supporting my channel more broadly, please subscribe. It is and always will be 100% free. But of course, the irony here is that both of these people, Donald Trump and Mamdani, ran not dissimilar campaigns. In fact, here's Trump admitting as much.
We had some interesting conversation, and some of his ideas really are the same ideas that I have.
But the difference comes in the fact that while Donald Trump talked about affordability, he's not interested in actually delivering on it. Trump campaigned on lowering the cost of housing, of rent, of groceries, of eggs, and what did he do once he got power? He engaged in a trade war that raised the cost of everything. He cut Medicaid from 17 million Americans, cut food assistance to the tune of $186 billion, ended subsidies for the Affordable Care Act that will result in healthcare premiums for 24 million Americans becoming 2, 3, 4, 5 times more expensive next year. Energy prices are surging. Inflation's been rising every month since March. Thanksgiving will be more expensive despite Trump's claims to the contrary. Quite literally none of what this guy ran on doing has come to fruition. And the truth is that affordability is simply not a focus for Donald Trump. It was on the campaign trail when he needed something from the voters, namely their support, but now that he's got power, he doesn't care about them. Now Trump's focus is on himself. It's on building a $350 million ballroom, on renovating the Lincoln bathroom in marble, on paving over the Rose Garden, on encrusting the Oval Office in gold, retrofitting a Qatari jet to the tune of $1 billion paid for by us, on buying Kristi Noem a couple of Gulfstream jets for $172 million, on hosting crypto dinners where he casually doubles his net worth, on hosting Gatsby-themed parties at his club. Trump pretended to be a populist because he needed something from you. But now that he's got power, he's focused on his actual priority, which is himself. Meanwhile, Mamdani has been laser-focused to the nth degree on delivering a more affordable New York City for its residents. Trump likes Mamdani because he thinks they're the same. He thinks that if you spout the same slogans as this popular upstart politician that upended New York politics, that you'll be just as beloved as him, and Mamdani is beloved. But Trump and Zohran are not the same. One of them is focused on helping the people that he represents, while the other is focused on helping himself. So I get that Donald Trump wants to be in the same category as Mamdani, but he would actually have to care about human beings other than himself if he wanted that. In fact, I asked Mamdani about the fact that his campaign did use a lot of the themes that Republicans' own campaigns touted in 2024. Here's what he had to say. You have been relentlessly focused on affordability. And so the irony of that is that Republicans ran a largely successful campaign in 2024 predicated on that exact issue. And so what does it say that they're attacking you for your campaign where you focus on affordability, and it's them who are doing identity politics now, which of course the polling and the early vote suggests have been largely a failing strategy?
Well, I think it shows that they're terrified of the prospect of us actually delivering on the same message that they ran on, because it would show in such stark contrast what they do with power and what we do with power, right? This is a president who ran on cheaper groceries, who's now spending $300 million to remodel a White House ballroom, the same amount of money that could give SNAP benefits to 100,000 New Yorkers. So the contrast is one that would be too great for them to bear. And that's what we have the opportunity to show, is that we don't just diagnose the affordability crisis in the lives of working class New Yorkers, we also deliver on that same crisis.
Again, Republicans were able to diagnose the problem and exploit the problem, but they never intended to solve the problem. Winning their elections was a means to a very specific end, helping themselves. But the con is up, and Americans are realizing the bill of goods that they've been sold. And that's going to be a big problem for Republicans moving forward when they try to beg for votes after having been caught lying so egregiously to the American people.